never promoted himself. Compared to many of the intellectuals today who go with biodata and number of conferences they have attended and so on, you could never get anything out of him. You could never get any suggestion that you should write an article about his work or whatever. He was very free with his information. He had huge volumes of information. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of matters in his head. But if you said that you wanted to write something on something that he was discussing with you, he said, go ahead and write it. And he would support anybody who would want to work on his data, on the things that he had collected. And never once would he ever insist that somebody should put his name, that his material came from Dharamapal's collection or whatever it is. I've never seen that. And that's another great sign, I think, of a great human being, that his ego didn't exist. It just didn't exist. I mean, he was a remarkable person. He lived a very simple life. He was dressed in khadi all his life, and always walked around in chappals, ate very simple food, lived in Sevagram. And Sevagram food is, of course, not the food on earth. We would get some rotis, sometimes baingan. We get baingan in the morning, sometimes baingan in the evening, baingan next day, and some dal. But I mean, that's how we survived. Of course, when he died in Sevagram, and his ashes were eventually interred in Sevagram itself. The other thing that is remarkable about Dharampal was that he was obsessed with Gandhi. I think he is probably one of the few people in the country who has read every single volume of the 90-odd collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. Except, of course, for Mr. Swaminathan, who was the editor of the works. He had to read them. This man read everything about Gandhiji. He was very critical of Gandhian institutions. I mean, he was not a Gandhian in that sense. I mean, he sort of, was so fed up with most of them because they had all become very old and moldy creatures, and you could visit any Gandhian institution, there would only be dust on the tables and nobody would read anything that was being written by them and so on, because they had also lost direction, and maybe they are also, in a certain sense, they were really not able to carry his mantle, and so they probably decided to retreat. That seems to have been what's happened. But the other thing is also, Dharampalji was supposed to be also, I remember, because I am not a person who is very closely associated with the BJP. I mean, I have very good friends in the RSS. I mean, Dattobal Tengdiji was a very good friend of mine. He would come to my house and have breakfast with me. I have inaugurated the sessions of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch myself. And I have been subject to the same amount of slandering that I have now joined the BJP and become an RSS worker and so on. Now, in his case also, I remember the time when the Babri Masjid was demolished. And at that time, he made some comments again which were reported in the media. And again, there was a whole lot of discussion going on about what Dharampalji has said and why did he say this, and he's promoting the programs of the RSS and the BJP and so on. And I had a discussion with him after the demolition of the Babri Masjid, and I said, did you say that it was a good thing that the masjid was demolished? He said, that is only partly what I said. He says, it's only partly what I said. I said that, I said, what exactly do you mean? He said, what I meant was that this country has become so passive. For 200 years, they have lost all their energy, they have lost their drive, they have lost their aggression, they have lost everything. They have become a dead people. Gandhiji tried to revive them, but after that, because he has gone, this whole British system has come full throttle back on us with their insane education system and their MBAs and whatever, and the public is completely become sterile and dead. So he said that it was a good thing that they developed the Babri Masjid, But he said that that is not enough. That was not enough. He said that the day this society will be fully liberated is when they go and demolish the Rashtrapati Bhavan. The biggest monument constructed to intimidate the people of India, the biggest vestige of imperial colonial rule all over the world. And he said that long as that building stands, people of India will be considered ants. They will never be considered human beings. So he said these are small things. Whether they, I'm not in, if they had demolished a church or they demolished even a mandir, he said I would not have. At least they must do something. But they're not willing to do anything. So for the first time they have done something. It's okay. It's an old mosque. Let them go and demolish it. I have no problem. But this is not. If the BJP thinks that this is the program of India, he says then they are completely misled and they don't know where they are to take these people of this country. Because he was very much clear in his mind that our problem was the institutions left behind by the British, which we have made our own. And unless we get out of the trap of those institutions, India is going to remain a Panjarapole. What is a Panjarapole? Panjarapole is a place where all the old animals, sick animals, people with broken legs, broken spirits, broken heads are all kept there and looked after. Palan karna hai uska. That is what we will be. But as a group of people who are determined to do something in line with our own cultural traditions, that you will not have any hope. You have to break that cage in which you have been put. And that you can only do if you make some effort. When you put a wild animal in a cage, the wild animal will at least make an effort to break the cage. If you put a domesticated dog or a chicken in a cage, they will never do so. Because they know that they are in a cage. So unless we, the people of India, realize the cage in which we have been put by the institutions and thought structures of the British and what they tried to do here, don't think that we will ever be free. And therefore, he said, the whole of this Lutyens complex should go, because as Pawan Verma has shown in his latest book, Becoming Indian, if you read it, it's one of the best books I have seen in the last 10 years, Becoming Indian. He shows chapter and verse how this Edward Lutyens was one of the most racist individuals ever to come out of England. He hated Indians. He wrote in the most humiliating language about Indians. He disparaged them, he ridiculed them, he built that particular Rashtrapati Bhavan or whatever they called it only with that mental framework. And we preserve it, and we symbolically put our most important person there. That is the level of our degeneration. And that is what made Dharampalji die in a rage. And we should try and figure out, because these are these big issues. These are big issues. It's not a small issue of whether you send your child to school or whether you get married, whether you get a good job. The issue is, will this civilization survive as we know it? Or will we become something else, which we are not, which we were never destined to be? Those are the issues that I'm happy are guiding the series of lectures. And if these lectures don't raise these issues, then you should close them down. These are the things that should be brought time and again back before the public. They should never be allowed to die. And even if Dharampalji is no longer with us, at least his output is with us. And we are so far as we are concerned, benefited because it's all finally in print. He produced 9 volumes. I'm just giving you some familiarity with them because I was involved in the publication of most of them. We were very keen that all Dharampalji's works get published in a proper academic fashion and be maintained in all the libraries of India. So what we did was we published all his main works in the form of the collected writings. There are 5 volumes of these collected writings. The first one is dealing with the science and technology situation in India in the 18th century. And the second one was dealing with the traditions of civil disobedience. Most of us feel that civil disobedience is associated with Gandhi, and Gandhi started it. But the remarkable thing about his book is that he showed that civil disobedience and different forms of civil protest, including Dharna, Traga, so many others, were part of Indian tradition. And in that one book of his, he relates a very huge civil disobedience, satyagraha, that was conducted in 1844 against a tax that had been imposed by the British in the town of Benares. So he was trying to show that Gandhiji himself linked to several aspects of his tradition. He innovated on them, but he didn't create them. They were there. He didn't come out of a basket. He was not a magician. He was part and parcel of that tradition, and he was able to innovate and radicalize them. The third volume is called The Beautiful Tree. The Beautiful Tree is based largely on the reports of Adams, who went round before the British took charge, did a survey, and found that in most villages in India, there were schools. Schools were operating. It's a survey done, physical survey done. It's not done by an Indian also, it's done by an Englishman. So you say, no, schools started, basic schools, even the entry of women into schools and all in England is hardly 100 years old. But in India, there were schools in every village. This is well documented. More important, the composition of the children who went to the schools was totally contrary to what we have been expected to believe. We think that the schools were only meant for Brahmins, and but the maximum number of students in those schools were in the category of Shudras at that time. I remember another very interesting statement that Dharampalji made when he was talking about his, in 66 or something, he was on a train journey. And he had got into a third class compartment, and there was a whole lot of women and men, and they were sitting and talking, how it is in a train.